Now I know you read the title and went, here we go again. Another Hoyo shield that's going to trash talk Wuthering Waves. So I'm going to start out this video by saying, I've had fun playing this game. I think it is, for the most part, a good game. Here's a video of me beating, in my opinion, the hardest boss in Wuthering Waves. The combat in the game is engaging, and this boss really tests your abilities. So no, I don't hate Wuthering Waves. But the recent revenue charts have confirmed my suspicions about what has been happening with the overall sentiment of the Wuthering Waves player base and their denial about the state of the game. With all that being said, let's talk about wall running. Wuthering Waves players love to bring up this point over and over again, as if it's the holy grail of their game. Before we go into the topic of wall running, I want to briefly bring up a key point of game design: overcoming obstacles. And don't worry, I'm going to make a point about wall running that will tie everything together, so bear with me here. Death Stranding, for example, is a good showcase of how elevation in video games is a challenge to overcome. A puzzle to solve, so to speak. The landscape itself is the game, and traversing it is something to accomplish. Now, I know a lot of people dislike Death Stranding, yet I feel like that's because they expected a different type of game from Hideo Kojima, but that's a side tangent I won't go into right now. All I will say is, personally, I enjoyed Death Stranding. However, when Wuthering Waves players proclaim that running up walls is vastly superior, and the fact that they bring it up so often is just kind of telling that the elevation they see in these games is a hindrance and an annoyance to be quickly brushed aside so that they can continue to rush through the content and fulfill whatever objective they intend on doing, most likely farming echoes. And it's your prerogative to see overcoming elevation in games as not very interesting. But I would argue that it is a large part of the open world game genre, and you can emphasize that speeding through the map is the entire selling point for you, but Genshin is not that much slower. I mean, there's teleport points all around the map, you just have to unlock them the first time, something you have to do in both games. You're not farming echoes in Genshin, so once you complete the map, all you have to do is commissions and weeklies, most of which are very close to teleport points around the map anyways. And there are characters in Genshin that traverse the terrain at a faster speed than others. And that's the incentive of obtaining said character. If exploration is a big deal to you, and how you get around the map is of great importance, then obtaining characters that can help you with that is an incentive on top of whatever else you may enjoy about that character. Now, I just spoke about wall running for a significant amount of time, and you might be asking, why even bring that up or talk about it at such length? The point is that Wuthering Waves players bring up wall running like it's the second coming of Christ. I mean, it's kind of neat to have, but it's being overemphasized to the extreme here. They emphasize aspects about the game that ultimately aren't major selling points to most people. It's just another dig at their competition that they don't really acknowledge as competition anyways. And we'll go into that point later. Because when you look at other parts of Wuthering Waves, there are things with the game that are clearly lacking. Music is just subpar, even for a Kuro game standard. PGR has a very good soundtrack, but Wuthering Waves lacks this, even though the theme of Wuthering Waves is about sound waves, which is just an odd artistic choice to have when your game lacks depth and variety in regards to its music. Not to mention the very drab and ham-fisted storyline in Wuthering Waves, where Rover is the alpha and the omega. The god that has amnesia is such a turnoff, but is done so out of Kuro's writer's need to pander to the CN player's self-insert desires. Yet I know what you're going to say here, but Paimon. And look, if you think Genshin's story sucks because of just Paimon, then okay, I'm not going to argue that, because I know that's something I won't convince you to change your mind on. But you can't deny that Genshin's lore and world building is one of the best aspects about the game. And recently, the past 3 nations have had actual decent to good storylines. Entire YouTube channels such as Ashikai have been born out of Genshin Impact's deep lore. I mean, even Garnt came out to say that Fontaine is his favorite storyline in any Hoyo game. If you don't believe me, take his word for it.
I can pretty much safely say that this was my favorite arc of Genshin Impact. In fact, I believe that this has been my favorite arc of any Hoyoverse game that I've played thus far.
This whole argument is boiling down to the key point of this video. A logical person could say, well yeah, there's some things that Genshin does better, and there's some things that Wuthering Waves does better, and they could learn from each other, right? Well, that's not what Wuthering Waves content creators are proclaiming. Most of them just turn on their cameras and find new ways to say how much of a trash game that Genshin Impact is. And their followers nod their head in agreement. They refuse to acknowledge that Genshin does anything right at all. It's like they're trying to convert Genshin players to their game and make them see the light in an almost religious type of experience, where when you play Wuthering Waves, you become self-realized, and before you were walking in darkness, and now you see the light that is Kuro Games, or some other cult-like analogy that oddly fits this type of rhetoric these people push out. The video I made a few weeks back is surprisingly telling that this is the case. The amount of comments I received about wall running and 4 years too late was astounding, but there's also others that are asking Genshin Impact to change its core gameplay loop. And that's the minimum standard that some people have for them to even consider recognizing Genshin Impact as viable competition in the genre. Now, he goes on later in the comment to suggest that Genshin should have some kind of system to farm artifacts from in the open world, kind of like Echoes. But one of the criticisms toward Wuthering Waves is that Echo farming is too grindy, and it takes a significant amount of time to farm up main stat Echoes, without a guarantee you'll see the substats you want when you tune them, essentially making you waste even more time farming. Remember, you're still limited by EXP and tuners as well, so it's not like you can expect to get perfect Echoes immediately. I'm not saying you should, but the reason why Echoes are an issue for a lot of people is the amount of time investment required doesn't really justify minuscule increases in stats that they might obtain. Might being the key word here. If you think farming easy mobs day in and day out for Echoes is good content, then sure, that's your choice, I guess. But there's a lot of people that don't think that mindlessly grinding open world mobs is a good use of their time. Now let's go into the recent new 4-star that Wuthering Waves just added to the game. I consider this a W. So you're saying instead of Yoo-Hoo or whatever her name is, Yoo-Hoo being on Shorekeeper's banner, they're saying, well, it's a W. This is the backwards stuff that Wuthering Waves players, it's just totally backwards. Like, what is this? This doesn't make any sense. Official banner announcement. They ignored the complaining Chinese crybabies. Well done, Kuro. You don't always need to listen. Right, so they're praising this. That the 4-star is on the rerun banner. When I'm pretty sure I've heard non-stop complaints about Genshin's 4-stars being on the rerun banner and people were losing their minds. But no, for Wuthering Waves, perfectly fine, guys. It's a W. It's a W. Like, I don't understand, man. Like, these people are just totally, they're out there, man. Along with this, and not to mention the optimization issues, the multiple events being repeated not even 1 year into the life cycle of the game, 4-star weapons being woefully underpowered compared to their 5-star counterparts, except for variation, which barely ever shows up on the 4-stars in the weapon banners, by the way, camera issues still being a problem. Like, why does the camera go wonky during Zhang Li Yao's ultimate? And the revenue for this month dropped a lot. And the argument is that many Wuthering Waves players use PC as their platform of choice for playing the game. But you can say that for every single Hoyo game as well. On top of there being a significant player base on mobile, they also have PC and console clients. But most of the time when you bring up these topics and issues with Wuthering Waves to the community that plays this game, they plug their ears, point back to Genshin and say, well, Genshin bad. Well, it doesn't make any sense. So many of you said competition is healthy. But you're not in a competition. You've proclaimed yourselves the winners and have sat back to relax because you think the race is already over. You think you have nothing to improve upon, and you lash out against people who criticize parts of the game you would otherwise deem unimportant, or you point the finger to another game and say, well, that game does it too, so... Continuing to discredit competition by repeating, well, it's 4 years too late. But hey, you at least have a cool slogan you can fall back on, but you're not really fooling people who are actually paying attention. Just be honest about Wuthering Waves, and be honest about the competition you say are your biggest adversaries. And stop trying to make excuses for the devs that clearly are making some questionable choices or haven't fixed things like camera issues, performance optimization, even on PC, and various other quality of life that should be implemented. Wuthering Waves has good aspects to it, but it would be far better if the player base would stop constantly glazing things that ultimately don't make a difference to how people perceive the game as a whole. Maybe then you wouldn't alienate a large portion of players who might otherwise have taken an interest in continuing their playthrough of this newest open world gacha game. Sure, Keeper, you gotta stop banging your head against the ground. This can't be good for you. This can't be good. Should we get you a helmet? I think you need a helmet.